The sun hadn't even fully cleared the jagged peaks of the Tetons when I heard the first rhythmic thwack of a designer heel hitting my gravel driveway. I was on my porch, mug of black coffee in hand, watching the mist roll off the lower pasture of the Miller Ranch. My family had owned these 300 acres since before the state of Wyoming had a zip code. We survived droughts, blizzards, and the Great Depression. But I wasn't sure we were going to survive the Aspen Hollow Luxury Estates development that had sprouted up on our southern border like a patch of invasive weeds. Then came the voice. It was high-pitched, nasal, and carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had never been told no in a retail setting. "Excuse me, sir, Mr. Miller." I looked down. There she was, Beatrice Vanderhouse. She was the president of the Aspen Hollow Homeowners Association. She was dressed in a white linen pantsuit that cost more than my tractor, and she was currently marching toward my porch like she was storming the Bastille. "Morning, Beatrice," I said, not moving from my chair. "You're up early, lose a poodle." She stopped at the foot of my stairs, breathless. "Mr. Miller, we need to discuss the situation. Our architectural committee had a meeting last night. We've decided that she gestured vaguely at my century-old barn. "Dilapidated structures are a visual blight. They are negatively impacting the property values of the estates." I took a slow sip of coffee. "That's a shame, Beatrice. Good thing my ranch isn't in your HOA. Beatrice offered a smile that was all teeth and no soul. "Actually, Silas, that's where you're mistaken. Under the new Greenway initiative passed by the county and our community bylaws, any property bordering the estates is considered community visual property. It means you have to adhere to our aesthetic standards. We want this fence gone, and we want that barn painted antique eggshell. Also, the cows there, pungent." I leaned forward. "Let me get this straight. You think because you built a bunch of McMansions next to a working ranch you get to tell me how to run my land?" "It's for the good of the community, Silas," she said, adjusting her pearls. "We're all one big neighborhood now. Your land is, for all intents and purposes, community property. We've even mapped out a hiking trail that runs through your north meadow. The residents are very excited about the rustic experience." I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I just smiled. It was the kind of smile my grandfather used to give right before a rogue bull learned why you don't mess with the head of the herd. "Community property," I repeated softly. "Well, that's an interesting perspective, Beatrice. I'll certainly take it into account." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of activity. I called my lawyer, a man named Hank who lived for two things: bourbon and suing people who overreached. "Silas," Hank chuckled over the phone, "she's quoting a non-existent ordinance. But if she wants to claim community status to justify trespassing, we can play that game. In fact, Wyoming's agri-protection laws are very specific about what happens when a residential development interferes with a pre-existing agricultural operation." "What about the fence, Hank?" I asked. "As long as it's on your line and meets safety codes for livestock, you can build a fortress if you want. And if they've been using your land as a trail, that's a liability issue. You're actually obligated to secure it." I spent the rest of the week at the hardware store. I bought 3 miles of high-tensile, professional-grade electric fencing. I also bought danger, high-voltage signs, the big ones with the little lightning bolt icons. I worked through the night. By Saturday morning, the boundary between the Miller Ranch and Aspen Hollow looked less like a neighborly border and more like a maximum security perimeter. I ran 3 strands of wire, chest-high, and hooked them up to a heavy-duty Gallagher fencer powered by a solar array. Click, click, click. The sound of the fencer was rhythmic and satisfying. It was the sound of boundaries. The climax of the weekend happened at 10:00 a.m. on Sunday. This was the time the Aspen Hollow Hiking and Wellness Club usually took their stroll through my north meadow to look at the wildflowers. I was sitting in my truck parked just inside my line when the mob arrived. There were about 15 of them, led by Beatrice and her husband, a man named Marcus who wore his sweater tied around his shoulders like a cape. They stopped dead at the new fence. "What is this?" Marcus bellowed, pointing at the wire. "Silas, you've blocked the trail." I hopped out of the truck, leaning against the door. "Morning, folks, just doing my part for the community. You see, Beatrice told me this was community property. And as a responsible member of this community, I realized I was being negligent. I have 5 bulls in that upper pasture that weigh 2,000 pounds each. If they got into your greenway, they'd turn your yoga mats into confetti." Beatrice stepped forward, her face turning a shade of purple that almost matched her jogging outfit. "You cannot put an electric fence here, it's an eyesore, it's dangerous, my grandson could touch this." "Then I'd suggest telling your grandson not to touch things that don't belong to him," I said calmly. "There are signs every 50 feet, Beatrice, in 3 languages." "Take it down immediately," she shrieked. "This is an HOA violation." "Actually," I said, pulling a folded stack of papers from my pocket, "this is a Wyoming Department of Agriculture Livestock Protection Zone. Since you claimed my land was part of your community use, you triggered a specific set of state statutes. Because your residents have been trespassing, using the community trail, you've created a liability for my livestock. Under the Right to Farm Act, if a residential development forces a rancher to upgrade their security or fencing due to community interference, the development is responsible for the costs." The crowd went silent. "I've already filed the paperwork with the county," I continued, handing a copy to a stunned Marcus. "The total for the materials, the labor, and the aesthetic disturbance fee comes to $14,200. Since this is community property, I've sent the bill directly to the Aspen Hollow HOA Treasury. I expect payment within 30 days or I'll be forced to put a lien on the estate's common areas. That includes your tennis courts, Beatrice." Beatrice looked like she was having a short circuit of her own. You can't, we didn't, Marcus." Marcus was busy reading the legal text. His face went pale. "Beatrice, he's right. By claiming the trail was a community right-of-way in the newsletter last month, you legally acknowledged that our residents were using his private land. We basically admitted to a massive liability. We're lucky he's only charging us for the fence." I tipped my hat. "I'm a fair man. I even used the antique eggshell-colored insulators you like so much." The fallout was glorious. The Aspen Hollow residents, who were already annoyed with Beatrice's iron-fisted rule over their mailbox colors, revolted when they found out their monthly dues were going up to pay for a Miller Ranch security wall. Within 2 weeks, an emergency meeting was called. Beatrice was ousted as president. The new board, led by a retired schoolteacher who actually liked cows, sent me a formal apology and a check for the full amount. They also signed a boundary acknowledgement agreement, which stated in very clear legal terms that the Miller Ranch was private property, not a park, not a trail, and definitely not community property. I took the $14,200 and did what any self-respecting rancher would do. I didn't buy a fancy car, I didn't go on a vacation. I bought a new, high-efficiency irrigation system that would keep my meadows green even in a drought. And I bought a very large, very expensive sign for the front of my property. It didn't say "go away" or "no trespassing." It said "Miller Ranch, established 1884, proudly not part of your HOA." A month later, I was back on my porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. The cattle were grazing peacefully near the south line. I saw a figure walking along the road. It was the new HOA president, Sarah. She stopped at the fence well back from the wire and waved. "Looks good, Silas," she called out. "Thanks, Sarah," I yelled back. Cows seemed to like the view. "Listen," she said, leaning over the roadside gate. "We're having a community barbecue next Saturday. No agendas, no Greenway initiatives, just burgers and beer. Would you like to come? We'd love to have a real neighbor there." I looked at my land. It was quiet. It was private. It was mine. But looking at her, I realized that being a good neighbor didn't mean letting people walk all over you. It meant setting the fence posts deep enough that everyone knew where they stood. "Tell you what," I said, standing up and stretching. "I'll bring the beef, but Sarah." "Yes." "Tell everyone to leave their linen pantsuits at home. It's a ranch, not a country club." She laughed, a real, honest sound that didn't involve property values or bylaws. "Deal." As she walked away, I heard the familiar click, click, click of the fencer. It was a beautiful sound. It was the sound of a lesson learned, a legacy protected, and a Karen soundly defeated. The Miller Ranch was still standing, and for the first time in years, the community finally understood exactly where the property line began.